Welcome to anyone watching, it's Craig at mysimpit.co.uk and welcome to part 1 in what will be a short series of videos covering upgrades to the Simpit. In this video I'm going to look to relocate this and simplify the wiring. Let's buckle up. In a recap to the last video, at that point we looked at the Simpit in detail at the stage of core project completion, and that was really at that point saying that the left console, the right console, the front dash and the flight seat were completed. And at the end of the video I outlined a number of future upgrades which we can see on screen now, which now as I enter this phase, which will be phase 2 of the Simpit project, and more of a slow burner in terms of undertaking this, will be to begin working through a number of these upgrades. And what I'm looking to work on at the moment are the ones highlighted. So the relocating of the Simpit will be a precursor to enabling me to implement the new visual setup, because where it is currently located there just wouldn't be enough room to either put in extra monitors or some kind of projector system. And whilst I'm relocating the Simpit, it makes sense to rationalise the wiring and to simplify it, and it will be really a question of taking away the server cabinet I'm using, taking away that whole hub and rewiring it locally, so it's localised wiring within the consoles themselves. So as I look at this now and I start to picture the process of taking all of this apart, moving it to a different room in the house, connecting it all back together, but at the time I do that, to eliminate a good portion of this wiring, which as we can see there's a lot. The biggest proportion of the wiring is what trails around the edge and runs to a hub, which was a data cabinet, and that housed the keyboard encoders and one of the microcontrollers, so we'll get rid of that. I'll just have a look and show the wiring from this side, because again there's a lot of plug sockets and extra cables, so I'll be able to give that a bit of a tidy up, and some of the plug sockets to perhaps house again under the front dash or within some of the console frames. So there is quite a piece of work here to move all of this. In terms of relocating this, I'll be looking to use a living room, which at the moment has some exercise equipment in. I had begun to, as my wife will say, encroach on the room, because I'd put a few fruit machines and an arcade machine in there. So I'm looking to now switch this room with my Simpit one. So this would become my hobby room, and I have started to declutter it at this point. So it is that bit bigger than the previous Simpit room, which will be great because it'll allow me to have the space to get the extra monitors for the visual setup. The old fruit machines, I do like a blast on these, and I'm building a virtual fruit machine here as well, so that can emulate hundreds of the machines. An old indie machine, and then an arcade machine that I put together. So this exercise equipment will go into what was my previous Simpit room, and then what that will leave me with is this room, the space we can see now to locate my Simpit, and I'll just shuffle all of these machines along to the other end. So I'd like to give a shout out to my wife for letting me switch rooms, because I really appreciate that this room will give me the space to accomplish the upgrades that I have in mind. So I'll start to clear some space, just move things around, take things out of the room. The room's quite well set up in terms of plug sockets, 4 on this wall, another 4 on the opposite wall, and another 2 as you come into the room. So that's all good. And something that I've done throughout the project, which will assist me greatly in the relocation of this, and all of the changes to the wiring will be I've documented all aspects of the build, including all of the key wiring connections. So we can see on screen here where I've documented that. So as I've gone throughout the project, the way I've laid this out is I've grouped the different items of work together. So everything I did for the left console, the front dash, the right console, and then the interface of microcontrollers, keyboard encoders to what I physically built, and then other items of information under general best practice, tests I did on components, and then some of the details of components themselves. And what will particularly help me with the work I'm doing now when I relocate the Simpit, so I'll have disconnected a lot of things and I'll need to know where they reconnect, but particularly to take out wiring and to, in its place, put new wiring in, and it's localized. So we can see here where I've got details of all of the connections of, in this case, this is one of the keyboard encoders. Keyboard encoder 1. There's 3 of these, so again we can see all of the connections. I can almost see for every colour of wire that I've used on any particular RJ45 port or socket, what that particular item controls. So this will be there for me to refer to as I simplify the wiring. And of course, in terms of other changes, it might be that I need to refer back to looking at all of the key bindings for each of the hubs. So we can see I've got all of this information here if and when I need to refer to it. Yeah, so really helpful that I've documented this as I have along the way. I've also got details of some of the DCS BIOS hubs as well. So in this case we can see where we've got, this will now be move this particular DCS BIOS hub from what was a server cabinet and to be housed within the left console itself, and we can see which particular panels this controls: DVADR, trim, the KY58 panel, intercom, etc. And also where there are certain designations for the pins that are unused, so if I want to tap back in and utilize some of that capacity, I can. So yeah, really handy. So with all of that information to hand, I can now start to disassemble the Simpit to move it across to the other room. So I'll start to take each item out, right console onto the chair, take that apart, find a way to move that through the left console, and then with that out of the way I can take away the flight control stick. And this leaves me with the big bit, which is the front dash, and that item is too big just to carry through the house, so I need to find a way to move that, so I'll be coming back to that one. Move the TV out of the way, and then I can begin to take those items and arrange them into the new room. Interestingly, the best way to get the flight seat through was to lift it onto a smooth table mat and pull it through. So at this point everything's moved across except for the front dash. I take some time now to look at this carefully and to think through and plan its journey, because it won't be able to move to the other room internally within the house. We also need to be careful during the move not to knock any of the internals. And I'm also looking at this point now to disconnect all of these cables at the back and not to use those again. They'll be removed, and all of this here, that will be gone, because a lot of that cabling is what trails around to the main server cabinet. I think this photo here captures really well the extent of all the cabling and how this is a really good opportunity to rationalize that. At this point I've disconnected a lot of the cabling and kept what's needed, and I'll now be looking to carry that through. I'll need to go through the garage and around the outside of the property, but here it is all now in place. And looking at the old room, it seems really strange to see it like this now. I mean, this room I've used my Simpit for the last 5 or 6 years, so it's amazing what you can fit into a space. I mean, that corner space, just a couple of metres by a couple of metres, has allowed me to house everything I've built in that time. So in terms of the new room, everything is in there. It's really going to be a question now of just taking the time to put it all back together. I'll just take a moment now to have a good look at that. There's quite a piece of work ahead to reconnect all this, put it all back together, bring it online, check it's working, and also make the improvements to the cabling. It's definitely the front dash that's the monster in terms of the density of all of the wiring. A lot of what I'll remove entirely will be what tried around the edge of the original footprint. Some of this wiring here will just be tidied and shortened. So I'll take the time now to begin to put all of this back together. It's also a good time to reorganise all of the power leads that previously they were intermixed, whereas now I have them grouped. So I have those power leads together that are for all of the inputs and the peripherals, the PC, the TV, things like that. But then all of the others that will be grouped together are the microcontrollers and the exported items through DCS BIOS. And that will allow me to have times when I'm using the computer without the need for all of the other equipment and microcontrollers all being powered on. So this is where I now go to the left console and begin to prepare it ready for localized wiring. So I've put some boarding in at the bottom to create a small platform to mount things onto. And I'll also put some power supplies in there and pull in some of the powered USB hubs. So what I do now is I turn my attention to the original data cabinet, and it's time to strip this down now. And as you can see, I've pulled out all of the innards, and we can see in front of us now these cantilever shells which have got each of the keyboard encoders on and one of the microcontrollers as well. It's only the content for the first 3 of these I will need, because the one that we can just see at the back now, that was the first ever non-PCB RS485 hub I did, but that was superseded when I put them onto circuit boards. So I'll go ahead now and start to mount some of these items within the console. We can see now one of the keyboard encoders. I'll just literally took that out as it was in the data cabinet and mounted it in there. Power supply. And as I now start to populate all of that and introduce all of the cabling, I can run all of the tests needed to be sure that it's all working properly. And we can see here where I've made a custom length Ethernet cable, and I've terminated either end, and I'm just running the continuity tests. And the same for the front dash as well. As I tap into the new wire, and I'm altering what goes to the MFCD, so just checking those new shorter cables. And it's all looking good. Yep. So what we can see now is all of the cabling that we've removed. So I'm certainly not going to be short of any Ethernet cables in the future. Absolutely loads. Yeah, it's really good to just get that out of the way. It's unnecessary complexity. And also the clutter. One of the things with the new location in the new room as well is not just that it gives a space for the visual upgrade in the future, but from a maintenance point of view, that I can more easily get around all of the Simpit and do maintenance on it. So I'm at the point now where I've simplified the cabling, put it all back together, and now I'm powering it on, bringing it online, and just running through a series of tests to make sure it's all working as it should. I've also mounted the motor controller box and the amplifier in place in a fixed position, and then the cabling pulls through underneath that and into the actual left console to be powered from within. I'll just have a bit of a look around, see that everything looks like it's working as it should. We've got the power monitors here for 2 of the RS485 networks. Visually it looks like it's all come online. What I'll do is I'll take a moment now to test a couple of the panels, just check they're functioning properly. One thing I can see is that the altimeter and standby attitude indicator, the motors have no power to them at the minute, so yeah, I'll make a note, need to bring that online. The HSI and the ADI, they're the two of all of them. If I could do a version 2 to refine it, it'd be absolutely brilliant. A lot of the core functionality is in place, but there's still a number of aspects of those that I'd like to implement. So first proper power up, and we're looking fine, thankfully. I was concerned that in the movement of this, particularly the front dash, a few of the items could get bumped, or just by the movement of it might not work immediately and need a bit of tweaking to get it back online, but we're pretty much there. So we'll just do a brief side by side of the room before and after. So definitely a fair amount of time and effort to move all of the Simpit, but in doing so now, much better set up for all of the upgrades ahead. Have space for the visual setup in the future. There's a lot more room to manoeuvre around the Simpit to do maintenance on different parts of it, and a very good first step in simplifying the wiring. There's still quite a number of improvements I can make to that in the future, but this is a good first step. Whilst I'm just taking a look around the Simpit at this stage, I'll bring up on screen the list of upgrades again. So in this video we've covered the relocation of the Simpit, which is the precursor to a new visual system. That's a good first step towards that. I've completely removed the data cabinet and all of the wiring associated with that and replaced it with localized wiring, so there's a lot less of it and it's more efficient. And here we can actually see some of the remaining cabling. There is still a lot, but it's definitely an improvement over what was there before. But that's one upgrade ticked off the list. The various panel covers that go on the sides of the consoles and on the sides of the front dash, I'll probably leave off at the moment for a short period and leave it in more of a skeletal form, because I'll be jumping in and out of different parts of the Simpit for the other upcoming upgrades and to do them and to plan them. In terms of the upgrade list and what we've done and what's ahead, I've just updated it to show that the space is now available, ready for the visual setup. Tweak the wording of the remove hub part because it really focuses on the localized wiring part. And I was thinking of the front dash and originally mounting that on wheels, but I really feel that that's something that wouldn't be needed now, because with it being located in a bigger space and on a hard floor, I can move it around quite easily. So this is the upgrade list as it is now. One of them ticked off and some initial work done towards it. I think the next area I'll most like to focus on will be upgrading the SAS panel and replacing those 4 toggles for ones that are magnetically held. Yeah, I think that would be a nice touch. And I look forward to sharing those upgrades in the future. Thanks for watching.